In our last installment, Isla showed us she is a strong, independent woman who needs no man, and once again ignored her star stick so she can solve her problems the hardest way possible. On the 5th day of the centennial, the invitation to the first demonstration arrived. The paper was charred, black, burned. Only a few words were visible, carved into the paper with a knife. Be ready to duel.
It's time to duel!
That's unnecessarily dramatic. Did they pin it to the door with a knife, too? Can Grimm not write on paper without burning it? Why is he writing with a knife? That seems like it would be hard to read. But seriously, from a world-building standpoint, why the threatening invitation? Especially with all the talk about how the Centennial is organized and polite now. This is a threat, not an invite. Honestly, feels more like another case of Aster following the rule of cool and not thinking through her story. Luckily for Isla, someone politely scrawled a time at the bottom of the mangled paper, and she gets the feeling of vindication because Grimm helped her after all. Isla had already purchased the ideal sword, one that was light enough for her to wield almost weightlessly, but sharp and firm enough to strike true. What does that mean? No, seriously, what does that mean? What sword was she looking at that didn't fit that description? It's been said before, but swords aren't that heavy. Even two-handed swords are only going to be about 5 pounds. Since Isla was able to put 2 of them down the back of her dress, it probably isn't a claymore. Maybe a short sword or a gladius, so about the weight of a loaf of bread. There's a phrase in writing, write what you know. The other half of that is, if you don't know, find out. Do the research. Aster clearly doesn't know swords, but it's a fantasy, and fantasy must have swords, so she put in swords. Seriously, this is like a 5-second Google search. Isla goes on to gush about the new dresses she stole. They have pockets, and they aren't see-through. Her assistant apparently hasn't noticed them, or has decided discretion is the better part of not having her heart eaten. Isla puts on her armor and reminisces about Terra's terrible training style. How many times had she been left abandoned in the middle of the woods, or a rainforest storm, with 50 pounds of chainmail and armor on her? Getting back took more than a day, without food, without water, with the howls of wolves and the patter of panthers at her heels. The last half-mile always done on her stomach as she dragged herself back to her room, nails digging into roots and dirt for purchase. Does Aster think training is like those bullshit alpha male videos? This won't make her stronger or a better fighter. This is how you break someone's mind so you can remake them. Though, maybe that's Terra's plan. And how did no one see the queen crawling through the dirt into a greenhouse? Is she hidden away or isn't she? She gushes about her new armor, including the shoulder pads, her words, not mine, chainmail tights, a sculptured breastplate, and metal-plated fuck-me boots. I'm going to hate this chapter so much, aren't I? Rulers controlled the variables of their trials, what it would test, where it would take place, if there would be any advance notice, and who was allowed to witness it. Grimm had invited all islanders. They sat separated by realm, filling each seat, rows lined with dozens of lit torches. Starlings in their glittering silver, skylings in their bright blue, moonlings in their immaculate white, sunlings in their polished gold. Again with the lists! I'm starting a list count. And if Grimm wants to prove he's the hottest shit to ever touch a sword, and everyone should know it, shouldn't he be giving a lot of notice? Beat them all when they put their best foot forward and have the whole island witness? Demonstrations were a spectacle. She knew that. Meant to test different skills. Meant to decide who deserves to die. Do they, though? If the rule is that a ruler has to die, and when the ruler dies, their island and people die, I can't see how fancy sword work or pretty magic is going to change my self-serving I don't want to die vote. And again, who are they demonstrating for? The people? Will there be a democratic vote followed by an execution? Who is voting against themselves to keep Grim and Isla off the chopping block? I can see how Aster took inspiration from the Hunger Games here. But those demonstrations had a purpose: to get support from the rich people in the capital and the districts to give them aid. Here, it's the ruling class peacocking for each other. The first fight is between Oro and Azul. The fashion porn takes longer than the actual fight. The duel finished within seconds. The king struck so quickly she almost missed it. One moment the tip of his sword was dug into the gravel arena, the next it was at the skyling's throat. Azul only smiled graciously and bowed, admitting defeat. Is there a penalty for not even trying? Or is this Aster admitting she doesn't know how to write a fight scene and refusing to try? Next is Celeste and Cleo, and we don't get to see it because Grim chooses this moment to flirt, saving Aster from having to write it. Isla manages to pull her eyes away from the actions so she can ogle him. Grim was a fearsome warrior. He wore a helmet of spikes like daggers that shot from the crown of his skull. One dipped between his eyes, shielding his nose. His shoulders had the same sharp metal points that ran down the length of his arm, spikes everywhere. He was a demon, death itself. Excuse me for one moment. Oh my god. Sorry, this is supposed to be intimidating. But all I can think is Steppenwolf from Snyder's Justice League. Just all of the spikes. He's trying so hard to be edgy. He's looped back around to silly. This is the armor you put on Saturday morning cartoon villains so little kids know he's the bad guy. But apparently, silly villain armor does it for the special sunflower. She swallowed. He watched the movement, staring at her neck far too intently, before almost absent-mindedly baring his teeth, like he wanted to bite her there. Her skin inexplicably prickled at the thought. No, that's disgusting. Isla forced herself to get it together. He didn't want to bite her. That was just in her head. Why was that in her head? Oh, honey. I don't know if he wants to bite, but you definitely want to be bit. You see, when an amazingly talented flower princess and her misunderstood dark prince love each other very, very much, some body parts sink into other body parts. The bell tolls and Celeste lost her match that we didn't see. But that's okay. Isla helpfully expositions to us that it's all part of the plan. They want to appear competent but not threatening so they can be paired together for the second half. Now it's Isla's turn. She somehow missed the fact that the only other person left for her to duel is Grim. Grim has a monstrous anime sword. Overcompensating much? Grim gets to decide the matches, and Isla, being very intelligent, concludes he paired them together so by beating her he looks better to the rest of the island. because there's nothing people like more than seeing a grown man in ridiculous armor and a huge sword beating the snot out of a girl child. Everyone loves a bully. He's about to let her win, ain't he? With a steadying breath, Isla drew her weapon and took a stance. It was second nature, like tumbling into sleep or taking a breath. I see the editor is still out to lunch. Just because tumble and fall are synonyms does not mean they are always interchangeable. Using breath in back-to-back sentences may not be technically wrong, but it sounds clunky. The bell sounds and the fight is on. And it's bad. It's really clear Aster doesn't know how to write a fight scene and didn't bother learning. He advanced and she blocked his blows. Tried again, only to meet steel. For a few stumbling, dizzying seconds, their blades met over and over and over, touching, skimming, clashing. She was light as a dandelion on her feet, but strong as the steel of her blade with every advance. It was part of her, a fifth limb, a beautiful, gleaming thing. Each of her motions was faster than the last, as she slipped into her rhythm, her flow, her dance. She felt the room like she was barefoot, the air like it was electric. A growl sounded from the back of her throat as she pushed Grim further down the arena. His eyes were fierce, no gleam in them anymore. Isla grinned, spun fast as a maelstrom to gather strength, and struck like a cobra. So hard that Grim stumbled. Just the slightest bit. It was all she needed. She leapt off the floor with a warrior's cry and landed right in front of him, pinning him to the wall. Her blade was at his throat. His clattered to the ground. So that was very anime. All it needed was sparkles and flashing lights. I could go on a long rant about how sword fight actually works, the importance of experience and physics and size and style. But ultimately, none of it matters, because even with the most well-written sword fight in the history of literature, the whole point of this scene is to make Isla look like a badass. What did Aster say about Grimm in Chapter 5? That he left the battlefield with his cloak soaked in blood? But little old 19-year-old Isla just put the baddest motherfucker in the room on the back foot. Because she's a special sunflower. And an idiot. Not a moment's thought is given to how she accomplished this. Of course she won completely on her own power. She's just that good. And she just proudly told us about the plan. How important it is for her and Celeste to look weak so they can be paired together. Does the wind whistle when it passes through her ears? No one claps for her except Oro, and then everyone cheers. And what passes for her brain finally catches up that something isn't right. But too late for that, she's already botched her own plan. God, this could have been so much funnier if they'd both been trying to throw the fight without looking like they were trying to throw the fight. Oro and Cleo get a hand-waved fight scene, and then it's time for Isla to fight Oro. And she promptly forgets everything she just learned, giving the fight her all. Again. He's trying to make her tired, but she brings the scene to a complete stop so she can reminisce about how Terra left her hanging from a tree limb for 5 hours. If she let go, she would break her legs, and she wouldn't get to go on a tour of the Newlands. She hung on, but still didn't get to go on tour as punishment for screaming. Because Terra's a terrible person. Anyway, her one neuron fires up and reminds her that she isn't supposed to win. She throws the fight at the last minute, but Oro glares at her because he knows she let him win. Or more likely, he's wondering why she didn't take the bait twice in a row. And once again, she fails to wonder why he wanted her to win. End chapter. Even without knowing the ending, this whole chapter reeks of setup. Azul doesn't even lift his sword. Celeste plays her part. Grimm throws his match, and Oro tries to do the same. The only people who tried were Cleo and Isla. Cleo because she's out of the loop, and Isla because she's an idiot with the memory of a goldfish cracker. Like my girl. Grimm has 500 years of experience in actual war. Even if Tara was the best teacher in any story, which evidence indicates she is not, there is no way to prepare a child for that. The fact he didn't flatten her at the bell should have been a big clue. Even after cottoning on that Grimm and Oro were up to something, watching Oro trounce Cleo, and then also not immediately flattening her, she still went hard. It took seeing Celeste for her to remember the very important plan. I can forgive her for not cluing into the fact that Oro and Grimm are up to something right away. But she has bragged about this brilliant plan she and Celeste cooked up for several chapters now, and she just face-planted at the starting block. Not one moment was spared to think about holding back, or that maybe a fight against someone 5 centuries her senior should be a bit harder. As for Grimm and Oro, that was about as subtle as, well, the magic in this series. Please join me next time as we continue our forced march through the world of Lightlark, and let me know how I can improve your shelf.